Hello and welcome to another edition of Cracking the Cryptic. Today is a two-video day. Just for those of you new to the channel, originally Mark and I envisaged that this channel would focus a lot more on crosswords, and we still like to solve crosswords and like to show you how to solve crosswords, but clearly the Sudokus and the logic problems are more popular. So what we endeavour to do is to still do a crossword video every now and again, but on those days there'll always be a Sudoku or a logic video as well. And the idea of the channel obviously is that you guys, to the extent you have the time every day, you can come here and find something interesting to do for a few minutes. Now, our thing that's interesting to do today is the New York Times puzzle from yesterday, the hard Sudoku, where we had an incredible number of requests to solve this puzzle. So clearly it's thrown up some problems, and I'm going to have a look at it in a minute. A couple of other puzzle related items just to mention. The Times Crossword Championship has finally been announced here in the UK. That's coming in December, and it's moving to more of a sort of New York Times or American crossword tournament style. So there's going to be a grand final on the stage for once, which I think it's a great move. So I applaud the Times for doing that. And the other thing is just to mention a good friend of the channel, Jason Zufranieri, one of the world's best Sudoku solvers, and in fact it's the World Sudoku Championship very soon in Germany. So look out for that, and we'll certainly be covering some puzzles from the championship as soon as we're able to do so. But Jason is currently on the third best Jeopardy run of all time in the States. He has 19 consecutive victories. He's amassed over $500,000 of prize money. So drinks are on him next time I see him. And he's going for number 20 tonight. So yeah, fingers crossed, Jason. And just to mention, as I said the other day, if you do like to watch people's brain work at speed, check out the video on the channel of him solving Kukuru, because that is worth watching. Now, how are we going to do this puzzle? Let's take a look. If you want to have a go, obviously you just click on the link under the video, and that'll take you to our software, and you can try it. I'm just looking at the twos at the moment. I can see that this 2 here means there's only 2 positions for 2s down in this bottom left box. New York Times puzzle, normally you can get through it with just a few pencil marks. I'm always interested when when we get emails about it being difficult, because sometimes the algorithm is generated by a computer, and sometimes the algorithm does throw up some tricky puzzles. So this 7 here is forcing a 7 into those 2 squares, which means there's a 7 up here in one of those 2 positions. And look, we've got 7s here as well. So there's a, oops. So now you can see that in this block and this block, the 7s are locked into the same rows in both of these 3x3 blocks, rows 1 and rows 3. So what we know is that there must be a 7 somewhere in row 2. So it's going to have to be in one of these 3 squares. Yeah, we can limit it a bit actually, because if we look at 5s here and here, so there's a 5 in one of those 2 squares, but this 5 here means there's a 5 in one of these 3 squares over on the right hand side. Now I don't know which of these 3 squares the 5's in, but obviously that means this square can't be a 5, so that is not a 5, that is a 5. And that does allow me to pencil mark 7s, oops, not 8s, 7s. Now, can we do any better than that? Don't know. We'll come back to it. Maybe there is something we can do there. Right. So we've had a look at 2s. We've had a look at 3s. 4s. We can limit to one of those 2 squares on the right hand side. That's this 4 and this 4 interacting like that. 5s into one of those 2 squares. These are these 2 5s. There's 3 6s in the grid, so that's going to give us a 6 into one of those 2 squares. think that's all we're going to get on the 6s. 7s we've looked at already. 8s, there's only 2 8s, and they don't look very helpful. So hopefully we'll get something from 9s, otherwise this is going to be much harder than I was expecting. Ah yeah, we're going to get something with 9s. Look, these 3 9s interact on this block. That means that square's a 9. And that square's a 9 because of the 9 over here. And that square's a 9, and therefore that square's a 9. So we finished the 9s. Now, what can we do as a result of that? I'm going to take a look at some of the rows and columns with lots of digits in, just to see if there's any naked singles. So we need a 1, 2, 4 and 5 along. That square can only be a 1 or a 4, because there's already a 2 and a 5 in the column. That square can only be a 2 and a 4, because there's a 1 and a 5 in the column. That square's 2 or 5, and that square's 1, 2 or 5. Okay, so that's no use. Let's have a look down here then. We need 1, 2, 3 and 6. Ah, yeah, okay, so this square here sees a 1, 2 and a 6 in the row. So this square is a naked single. That square, looking at that square, the only possibility that goes in there is a 3. Now I can see this 3 and this 3 now interact quite nicely on this block, look. That forces a 3 into one of these 2 squares, and that gives us a 3 in one of those 2 positions over on the right hand side. And let's just check the rest of this column. We still need 1, 2 and 6. Ugh, that's no use at all. That square's got to be a 1 or a 2, I guess. And that means there's a 6 in one of these 2 positions. There's a 6 in one of these 2 squares as well. Right, okay, let's have a look along here. So we need 4, 7 and 8 to complete this. That's got to be a 4 or an 8, because we've already got 7's pencil marked in the block. 4, 8, that's a 4 or a 7. Okay, I'm starting to see why this is causing a problem, because it's certainly not falling over, is it? What can we spot here? Okay. Right. Yes, yes, I can get another digit less. Okay, so if we have a look at this column, you can see the numbers 4 and 5 are interesting. This square can't be a 4 or 5 because of the row. And this 4 is interesting because of these 5s here. So actually the numbers 4 and 5 are shoved upwards here. Well, they could go into this square and they could go into one of those 2 squares at the top. So now the reason that's interesting to me is, look, if I know the numbers 4 and 5 go into a subset of these 3 squares, I've already got pencil mark 7s up here into these same 3 squares. So actually this is a 4, 5, 7 pair into these 3 squares. Now that means this square cannot be a 3. So we're definitely going to get a 3 there as a result of that. Now we may do better. Let's just check. This square can only be 4 or 5 because of the 7 here. This square can only be 4 or 7. And this square can be 4, 5 or 7. Okay. We get a 3. Now does that help? It does a little bit. This 3 here, this square here can't be a 3 obviously, so there's a 3 in one of those 2 squares. A 3 over on this side now. Where can an 8 go in this block at the top? Well, as we know these squares are part of a 4, 5, 7 triple, it must be an 8 in one of those 2 squares. That means there's an 8 in one of these 2 squares because of the 8 here and the 8 there. and that means this square has to be an 8 because of this 8 there. These squares interact to force the 8 over into that position. And that's cool. Now, these 8s here are pretty powerful in terms of this block, look. Because we know this square needs to be a 4 or a 5 because of this triple. This triple is, I suspect, what's caused people trouble. Once you have this triple, all of a sudden I can see things starting to fit together. So now these 8s, they have to have an 8 here. Now the moment I place this 8, I've obviously got an 8 to place up here, but in placing this 8 I also took the pencil mark of a 6. So I'm going to be able to place a 6 up here as well. So now there's a 6 in one of those two squares. This square must be, now that square we know is a 4, 5 or a 7 to complete this block, but look down there, there's a 4 and a 7, so that square is a 5. Now we were diligent about our pencil marks earlier. We know this square is a 2 or a 5, so once we have a 5 in the column, that square's got to be a 2 now. And you can see this is all now starting to flow. This 2 here means this square must be a 4, and this square must be a 1. And the only thing we've got to be careful about now is not losing track of all the progress we're making. Now this square's got to be a 5. It's the only place a 5 can go in the row. And this square must be a 5 now. I suppose we had that already from our 4, 7 triple. Now these 5s interact and they're going to give us a 5 there. And the moment I place that 5, this square must be a 7. There's a 7 in one of those 3 squares over on that side. So a flurry of progress. That square's got to be a 3 to complete the column. Now there's a 3 in one of those 2 squares, look. That means this square up here can't be a 3 anymore. I've got pencil mark 3s there. That's not valid, so that must be true. We need 1, 2 and 4 into those squares, and there's a 4 there. So 4, 2, 1. This must be a 3. And I think, I don't want to speak too soon, but it certainly feels like we're on the right track again. Now we need an 8 into one of those 2 squares, and that means this square must be a 1. 1 into one of these 2 positions. These squares here have got to be 1, 2 and 7. We've got a 1 and a 2 already in column 1, so that one's a 7. That is going to be useful in terms of the bottom. You can see the pencil mark's working hard here, so this can't be a 7 anymore. So this is the 7. In placing the 7 we get 2 as well. One of those 2 squares must be a 2. And these 2 squares here must be 4 and 6 in some order, and there's a 4 over on the right hand side. So 4, 6. This 6 now is going to resolve the pencil marks down here. 6, that resolves that pencil mark to be a 1. That gives us a 1 in this square. Let's remove the 6 from this square. This square is a 3 or an 8. Actually, that square's got to be a 2 to complete the column, hasn't it? So these 2 squares are a 3, 8 double. And let's hope we don't slow down. So we've got 2s and 3s into these 2 positions. This square here must be a 2 because of the 2 down here. That means that square's a 1. That means that square's a 1. This one can't be a 1 because of the 1 here. This 7 sees that 4, 7 double, so that's a 4, and that's an 8. That unwinds this 3, 8 stuff down here. 8, 3, 3, 8. This 3 sees the 2 and the 3. Yeah, so I'm sure that we're on the right track now. The whole key to this puzzle was that triple. And yeah, that was certainly not easy to see. 6, 6. 6, 6, 6, sign of the devil in this puzzle. Well, whatever next. and that must be an 8, and that must be a 7. Let's actually fill in all the digits. That would be a sensible thing to do. 4 and 6, check. There we go. So that's how to do the puzzle. And as I say, I think the entire key to that was noticing the restrictions on 4s and 5s down this column. And you know, how do you do that? Well, it's practice. That's the simple answer. It's getting a feel for restricted rows and columns. I always start with rows and columns that have 5 given digits in, and once you go past that, you need 4 given digits. Or in this case, if you remember, there were 7s pencil marked up here. So although I only had 3 given digits, with the 7s pencil marked up here, that's effectively 4 given digits, because I don't have to worry about the 7 in doing the calculation. And then, you know, it's not too difficult, I think, to see the 4 and the 5 once you're only focusing on the remaining 5 digits of the column. So I hope that's useful. If you're not subscribed and you do enjoy the content, please subscribe. We really appreciate it. We'll be back soon with another edition of Cracking the Cryptic.